Hello everybody, welcome to the release note webinar for the Netsuite 2019.2 release. Today we'll be looking at the system administration part of the 2019.2 release. Quick introduction, we are now at the 1st of October looking at system administration. I'll be your host today, Bas Verstegen. We have two more webinars planned. Unfortunately, the one for tomorrow for SRP and project management, due to a bug in the functionality, we had to postpone. If you're interested in the SRP and project management release note webinar, this will be planned for the 23rd of October at 3 o'clock. For W&D manufacturing, Marcel will host a webinar on the 4th of October, this Friday at 3 o'clock. A couple of administrative notes. I'll be your host for today. We're looking at the general and system administration part of the 2019.2 release. If you could please mute your microphones during the feature presentations so it doesn't bother anyone. If you have any questions, please post these in the chat window and we'll try to answer them after the feature demonstration or in a follow-up email. The agenda for today, we'll be looking at a user access reset tool. We'll be looking at multi-subsidiary entity enhancements, system notes version 2, and we'll be looking at workflow actions on item sublist. The user access reset tool is a feature that resolves the need for an administrator to fully reset a login access for a locked out user. Most of you are administrators, and as you've probably found, resetting a login for a user was quite cumbersome. You would always have to reset the entire login for a user, whilst there could be several reasons why a user was logged out. With this new user access reset tool, you're allowed to simply reset one of these steps. So that could be, for instance, a password reset. You can reset the user security questions, reset a user after he or she is logged out because of entering incorrect passwords, and you can reset the 2FA settings. That means that if a user forgot the answers to the security questions, you don't need to reset the entire login for a user. They don't have to choose a new password. So I'm briefly going to demonstrate this in a NetSuite environment. I created a user. And I gave this user an email address, and the user has login access as an account manager. However, let's say with this login I forgot my security questions. What I can now do as an administrator is navigate to Setup, Users and Roles, and go to the User Access Reset tool. First of all, I have to type in the user's email address for which I want to reset the details. And then I can select the desired action, and it could be one or more of these actions. So what I can do is initiate a password reset. If I would initiate a password reset, the user with this email address would get an email with steps to reset the password. I can also clear a user's security questions. So upon logging in, I would have to fill in new security questions for this user. Alternatively, if I've in 6 consecutive times filled in an incorrect password, I can use this checkbox to unlock the user's access without him or her having to wait. And in addition, I can reset the 2FA settings. So for this demonstration, I'm going to clear this user's security questions. So all I have to do is check this checkbox and click Save. And that will reset the security questions. Now, to demonstrate, I am going to log in as this user. I'm still able to use the same password because I didn't reset this password. And once logged in, I'm prompted to fill in the security questions. And I can simply reset the security questions any which way I want them to be. And that's it for the user access reset tool. The second feature I'd like to demonstrate to you is the enhancements around multi-subsidiary entities. As most of you know, over the past few releases, I think 18.1, 18.2, and 19.1, NetSuite's been working on allowing you to consolidate all the trade relationships you have with one vendor and one customer with different subsidiaries into one single multi-entity record. In this release, they're extending on that capability, and they're adding the option to create multi-subsidiary entities for intercompany customers and intercompany vendors. And I think that resolves the fact that when you have 10, 15, 20 subsidiaries, you don't need a one-on-one trade relationship customer and vendor for all these relationships. So it can save you sometimes hundreds of records. In addition to that, NetSuite is now rolling out support for duplicate detection for multi-subsidiary customers, and it allows you to merge these entities with a mass update. So it's simplifying merging, and it's simplifying duplicate detection for these types of entities. In addition, and this wasn't possible in the last release yet, it allows you to merge multi-subsidiary customers of the type individual. So if you're dealing with B2C, that can be helpful from different subsidiaries. Before we demonstrate this feature, I would like to discuss some best practices. These are best practices coming from NetSuite, and we strongly advise you to follow these best practices. First of all, we can't stress this enough. Please, when you merge these entities, do a dry run in your sandbox. Test thoroughly in sandbox. Especially around customers and vendors, are key processes, and every process that touches on these records needs to be tested. Second best practice is merge smaller entities into larger entities. These merge practices can be quite heavy, and every entity that you merge has a number of related records or transactions. It does make sense to merge entities with a smaller number of related records into larger entities. What's also good to know is, and especially because there's some limitations to features that still use the customer or vendor primary subsidiary, is that changing the primary subsidiary of these multi-subsidiary entity records is not possible. So if you're merging into another record, it will automatically take over the primary subsidiary of the record that you're merging into. For testing purposes, we strongly advise you to extract some historical reports, both financial reports, as for instance AR, AP reports. Check the data for consistency before and after the merge. Make sure that the data is consistent with the way it was before the merge. If you're unsure about this process, or if you need assistance, you're more than welcome to involve us, your partner, Fast4, or NetSuite Professional Services, especially around intercompany entities. We also advise you to do the merge outside of peak hours. It's can be quite a big process, and there can be a lot of records and transactions to merge. So we advise you to do it off peak hours so it doesn't impact your performance. Last but not least, the merge operations cannot be undone. It's important to understand that once you've merged records, they cannot be unmerged. I'd also like to discuss from merging of these multi-subsidiary entity enhancements. There are some merge rules that apply. So once you merge, there are a couple of rules that apply. First of all, like I mentioned, and we can't stress this enough, the operation is irreversible. Once you've merged, there is no unmerging or undoing what you've done. If you merge a record into a master record, and the duplicate record that you're merging from has a field filled in that was previously blank on the master record, that field will be populated. However, no field data will be replaced. So if a field was already populated on the master record, then the data on the master record will stay in that field. If you want to merge two entities, the entities must have the same tax ID. In your case, the VAT registration number. It could also be blank, so blank is an option as well. But if you want to merge two entities that have the same tax ID, it could either be blank or they need to have the same tax ID. It's good to understand that all activities, transactions, messages, files, cases, and contacts will be merged into the master record. And after that, the duplicate entity will be deleted. So there is no duplicate entity remaining anymore. To make use of this feature, you need the multi-currency feature enabled. And last but not least, when an error occurs during the process of merge, it's good to understand that the records are returned to its original state. So the state as it was before the merge. So I'm going to demonstrate some of these features in the NetSuite environment that we were looking at. I'm going to start off by showing you the features that you need to enable to make use of this. So under Setup, Company, Enable Features, there are, if you want to make use of multi-subsidiary customers, two features that you need to enable. If you want to make use of the multi-subsidiary customer, you need to check this checkbox. And then if you would like to merge your existing database during the process, it's advisable to activate duplicate detection and merge. Duplicate detection allows you to set up detection of duplicate records based on fields on the record. And you can merge in that process. So you can use duplicate detection to merge records into one record using a master and a duplicate record. So for duplicate detection, some setup is required as well. You can find that under Setup, Company, and all the way down there's duplicate detection. First of all, you need to check this checkbox, detect duplicates across subsidiaries, customers and vendors only, if you want to merge across subsidiaries, so multi-subsidiary customers and vendors. The second part is, per record type, you need to set up which fields you want to use to detect these duplicates. I've set it up, for instance, for customers to look at the company name, full email address, and represent subsidiary. For vendors, I set up email representing subsidiary. I guess it depends on the way you set up these records and on the way you do business, which fields would make most sense to match upon. But NetSuite will detect duplicates based on matching of these fields. So give it some thought on how you want to set this up and what works for you. So to demonstrate the duplicate detection and the merge features, I'm going to show you three different types. First of all, and this is new, I want to show you how the merge works for individuals, because before that wasn't possible. So I've created three customers of the type individual: Hielke Sluis, Hielke Sluis 2, and Hielke Sluis 3. And as you can see, I already get a warning that this record may have duplicates. So you see this one has subsidiary Netherlands, this one Huffman Manufacturing, and the third one is a customer of the United Kingdom subsidiary. So if I look under transactions, you can find that a couple of these have transactions. So Hielke Sluis 2 has an invoice, and the customer Hielke Sluis have a couple of invoices as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to merge Hielke Sluis 2 into Hielke Sluis, and the simplest way of doing that is by editing the customer record from which you want to merge. It will show a merge button, and when I click that merge button, the merge functionality opens, and I can select a record to merge into. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to merge into the Hielke Sluis record that I've just shown you. select the customer and click on merge. Again, you get the message that the action is irreversible, and if you want to continue with the merge, I'm going to click OK. That takes me to a second page. I see that my merge is queued. So let's give it a minute to process this. As you can see, it's processed now and grouped with one master. And now if I open this customer record, see it's merged into this record. And there's a subtab subsidiaries. You see now there's a trade relationship with 3 subsidiaries. And for 2, I have invoices. And the invoices were merged into this record. So that's the first way of merging I want to demonstrate. The second one is through the entity duplicate detection functionality. This can be found under List, Mass Update, Entity Duplicate Resolution. As you can see from the duplicate detection functionality, what this does is, based on the field settings I showed you in the setup before, these relationships are grouped in certain groups of which you can identify a master and duplicate, or mark records not as a duplicate. What I'm going to do here is use this functionality to merge these remaining individual records. I'm going to use Hilkesluis as a master record, and Hilkesluis 3 I am going to mark as a duplicate. And now again, if I submit the selected, it's going to tell me that the merge is irreversible, and I'm going to click OK for it to process. Again, it shows up in my queue, and once it's done, I can revert back to the record. Now we see the record is merged into this single customer. So the third thing I want to show you is, and that's another addition to the functionality, you can also merge intercompany relationships. So to demonstrate this, again, I am going to use the List, Mass Updates, Entity Duplicate Resolution feature. And as you can see, number 3, there are 3 intercompany relationships that can be grouped and turned into one record. So I have Huffman Inc., the intercompany customer for subsidiary Netherlands. I also have Huffman Inc. ICNZ and Huffman Inc. IC Australia. Both are customers with the represent subsidiary Huffman Inc. So what I'm going to do is, because these 3 customers all have the represent subsidiary Huffman Inc. field, I am going to merge 2 of these customers into one record. And I'm going to select the first one as a master record and the second one as a duplicate. And again, that will merge into one record, which is the intercompany customer, Huffman Inc. IC. Now if I look under subsidiaries, I can see that New Zealand was added as a subsidiary for this record. And I simply have, instead of 5 separate intercompany, 4 separate intercompany relationships and intercompany customers, I can just create one intercompany customer that has a trade relationship with these 4 subsidiaries. So that's it for the multi-subsidiary entities, the merge functionality I wanted to show you. One last thing I would like to mention is that it is also possible to use mass updates for duplicate resolution. So you can perform mass updates to merge your intercompany relationships. The way that works is you can select the master by created earliest, the most populated fields or most recent activity, and the duplicates you can, or the record you select, you can take them all from a duplicate group, take the master from a duplicate group and the duplicates from a search, or both the master and duplicates from a search. This is a bit more iffy because you need to ensure that the records that you're going to merge are grouped properly, that there's no mistakes in it before you run it, and there's just this page to show you how it's going to merge. So the information is limited here. So we would definitely advise you to use the duplicate detection unless you're very sure what you're doing. Again, this is irreversible, so please ensure that what you do is 100% correct. What's also good to mention is there are, for especially around multi-subsidiary customers, some feature limitations. It's incompatible with suite billing accounts, consolidated payments, and MOS. And there's several pieces of functionality that are incompatible with multi-subsidiary customers. In addition, and this is we find this somewhat cryptic, some suitelet scripts that also are suitelet scripts from native NetSuite functionality, electronic payments for instance, still depend on the primary subsidiary of the customer as opposed to the primary subsidiary of the transaction, which means that not all transactions may be displayed in certain suitelets throughout NetSuite. So again, we can't stress this enough. Please thoroughly test this functionality before you take it in production. The third feature release I want to touch upon is System Notes version 2. Unfortunately, it's not something I can demonstrate right now because it's a limited release and will only be available for the custom transaction types. Unfortunately, it's none of our release note accounts so far, but just so you know, it's going to be released for the custom transaction type, and it's a new version of System Notes. This new version of System Notes is mainly for administrators. The advantage of it is it allows you to track changes in the configuration of records and the record sublists for administrators. That means that from now on with System Notes version 2, you can start tracking any changes that there might be on records and record sublists. So if anyone adds or makes changes to certain fields or sublists or body fields on a record, you can track this in NetSuite. This feature will also come with a System Notes version 2 Suite Analytics workbook. So again, that workbook is available in the Analytics portlet, and I will, even though there's no data in there yet, I'll show you where it is. It's under the standard workbooks. As you may have found in the release preview, NetSuite's putting quite some time in setting up standard workbooks. So there's a System Note version 2 workbook. To open it, just click on it, and this will contain all the data of all the changes on these records in this workbook. So the last feature I want to demonstrate to you is the extended capabilities of doing workflow actions on item sublists. Over the last 2 releases, NetSuite started with rolling out the capability of making changes on sublist level through workflow. Before that, for every minor change that you wanted to do on the sublist and also the item sublist, you would have to script it, meaning setting field values, making fields mandatory, setting field display type, everything had to be scripted. So it's quite a bit of scripting done to, for instance, set field values or making fields mandatory on line level. And we're now rolling out capabilities to do that through workflow, so it can be managed in the UI. They're expanding on these capabilities in 19.2 quite a lot with some we feel important features that could deprecate a lot of scripting. And I'm going to demonstrate 3 of these features. First one I'm going to demonstrate and discuss is the possibility to set a field display type. From now on, for a custom transaction line field on the item sublist, you're able to set the field display type. It comes with some limitations. For instance, currently it's only available on the item sublist. It only allows you to set the display type on custom fields. Native fields is not possible anymore, or not yet, unfortunately. It's only available in server triggers, meaning before record load, before record submit, after record submit, an entry, exit, and scheduled. And it applies to an entire sublist column, so it's not possible to do it specifically for one line in your record. Even with these limitations, we do feel there's several possible applications that it could really help you out with. First of all, is what this does is it gives you the possibility to hide custom fields for certain user roles on a form without creating a copy of the entire form just for this purpose. So it may save you a lot of maintenance on your forms. Another advantage is you can enable and disable fields during part of your approval workflow, or disable them for certain user roles through an approval workflow, for instance. I'm going to demonstrate to you the first one. So what I did is I've created a workflow, sublist workflow, and what that workflow does is it sets the field display type based on a user role. So let's say company Huffman, the finance team generates purchase orders. However, other people should be able to see those purchase orders and approve the purchase orders as well. But there might be finance notes that they want to restrict visibility for to their finance team. The way you can do this with these workflows now is you can set the field display type of the field finance notes to normal for the user role accountant. And if the user is not an accountant, we're going to hide these finance notes. So I'll show you how one of these fields, field actions, is set up. They've changed that a bit. This looks quite familiar. The trigger, the condition that you have. What has changed is that you need to select if you're going to set or change a body or sublist field. And you choose the sublist, the field, and they're now denoted with the type between brackets. So line fields are denoted with line between brackets. And we're going to set the display type to hidden. So I'm logged in as an administrator. So what I'm going to do is I am going to enter a purchase order. And as you can see, I don't have to select anything, but the finance notes field doesn't display. So what I'm going to do is in Huffman Manufacturing, I'm going to switch to the accountant role. And now if I enter a purchase order as an accountant, as you can see, finance note fields will display on line level. So I can limit these fields to certain roles using this functionality. So the second feature I want to display is, and I think this is a very useful one, Netsuite has extended the set field value action now to be available on client-side triggers. In addition, the conditions that you set to set these field values can be on a combination of body and line level fields. So there's two limitations. Currently it is only available on the item sublist again, like all the workflow actions. Second is that it's only available on after field edit trigger or after field sourcing trigger. even with its limitations, again, I think there's quite a lot of value in setting default or conditional values on line items. I know quite a few of you, for instance, set default values based on a source from a joint record. And you can think of things like sourcing a preferred class or preferred department from a vendor or customer record. Or for instance, a preferred location from an item record. And this is exactly what I'm going to demonstrate to you. I am going to switch back to my admin role, and again I'm going to show you a workflow that I've created. Again, this workflow just has one state, and apologies, wrong workflow. What I'm doing in this workflow is after field edit, I am going to set the line field location to location sourced from the item record. So based on, for instance, the preferred location on an item, I can automatically set this on the transaction. Also works for department. Basically, any field is not restricted to custom fields. You can source it from anything. As you can see, my triggering client fields is in the sublist item, the line item. And it works on after field edit. So what this does is once I set the item on line level, it will source the location for my item and populate that location on line level field. This workflow runs on a sales order. So what I'm going to do is I am going to create a sales order. So give it a moment to load. And the customer I am going to select is 3M. So as you can see, nothing populated on this line. And I'm going to sell a bunch of bananas to 3M. And now that I've selected banana, you see it automatically populates my location based on when I set the item. And it pulls that from the item record. So it's a location field on the item. Third possible action I am going to discuss with you is the option to return a user error on a custom item line level field. So again, it only works on the item sublist, and this is only available on the field edit trigger and after field sourcing trigger. So a possible application for this is that you can do client-side entry validation scenarios without scripting. So it allows you to, if you set it up correctly, to avoid having incorrect or inconsistent data entry on line level without scripting, and that's very useful. So again, I've created a workflow to demonstrate this feature. So this third workflow that I'm going to demonstrate to you is a bit more elaborate. I'm using a combination of set field value and these return user errors to show you a scenario where some validation and some automation of setting field values comes into play. So this is the workflow that I'm going to demonstrate to you, and it runs on a purchase order. So let's say at Huffman we always try to, of course, purchase our items with the preferred vendor. So what I can do with this return user error is if an item is not ordered with its preferred vendor, after sending the item, is return a message that the item should be ordered only with a certain entity if the line item is not available with the preferred vendor. I'm doing that in triggering of the item field on the line. I'm going to demonstrate that first by entering the sales order. Sorry, a purchase order, of course. So what I'm going to do is select Abbey Enterprises as a vendor. And I am going to purchase the item 210122. So you see, when I try to order this item with Abbey Enterprises, it gives me a message that I should only be purchasing this item with this vendor if it's not available with the preferred vendor. So that's not all I want to do in the workflow. You may have noticed, but the quantity is already set to 10 automatically upon adding this item to the line. So let's say if I want to purchase this item with Abbey Enterprises, and I know I get a good discount if I buy them in quantities of 10. What I can do with the set field value workflow action that I already showed in the last workflow is, and it's conditional as well, after field edit of the field item online, if the vendor's Abbey Enterprises and the item is 210122, what I'm doing is I'm setting the quantity online to 10 already, just to visualize for a user that it makes sense ordering these items in batches of 10. So not only am I setting the quantity to 10, I've added another return user error, and this time I'm returning a user error if after changing the field quantity to any quantity that's not a multitude of 10 by this formula, I'm returning a user error that mentions to the user that this item with a vendor, and with a free marker, I'm adding the entity here, should be ordered by quantities of 10. So how does that result in the workflow? If I set my quantity here, for instance, to 17, tab, I'm getting a message that I should be ordering this in quantities of 10. If I set it to 20, it's not a problem. 30, not a problem. 37. So as you can see, this is quite a good way to avoid faulty data entry, or to enforce people to think about certain things when entering data on these transactions. So all in all, I think quite some quite decent extensions to the workflow actions on line level capabilities NetSuite has to offer. So that's it for the features I wanted to demonstrate. In conclusion, we will post this webinar on www.fast4.com under the news section. We'll notify you once it's there. If you want to know more, or you're interested in implementing any of these features, please contact me at bus@fast4.com. If you still want to sign up for any of the other release webinars, please contact me at bus@fast4.com. Thank you very much for joining, and have a great day.